All right, I want you to take a listen to this, and you can watch it too, as we're going to play the video on the YouTube stream. This morning on Jen, Gabe, and Chewy, Mark Chmura, former Packers tight end, and Jason Wilde, who, if you're subscribed to the Mr. Irrelevant podcast feed, you see me do weekly Wilde with each and every Thursday. A little bit different of a show. I throw Jason in the passenger seat, and I just have him react to things I have on my mind, or we talk about the ideas and the concepts behind, the ideology of Matt LaFleur and why he's talking the way he is, stuff like that. So if you want to check it out, we do weekly Wilde every Thursday. You can find it in the Mr. Irrelevant podcast feed, which means you get 4 episodes a week in the Mr. Irrelevant podcast feed. But anyway, Wilde was on Jen, Gabe, and Chewy this morning, and they discussed the idea of Sean Clifford, right? He's been in the system now a year and a half. Well, over a calendar year, we should say. Last season, this preseason, started 2 of the preseason games. Ultimately cut from the active roster, signed to the practice squad, elevated this week to be Malik Willis's backup. But this guy knows the system. He's been in Green Bay over a year. Why isn't he the starter this weekend? Jason Wilde discusses with Mark Chmura on Jen, Gabe, and Chewy this morning.
Jason, who would you start? I mean, a guy that pretty much knows the entire playbook, can run motions, probably knows the progressions fairly well, or a guy who's going to have half the playbook in and you have no idea?
Yeah. I'll be honest. I would start Clifford.
I would too.
And I say that having been, to use Goody's term, underwhelmed by Clifford in camp this year. Right? Like, it started rough with him not doing very well when he was put with the starters, which is what he would be having done on Sunday. But then he kind of found a rhythm, and then in the games he was kind of meh. It wasn't great, but it wasn't like, I didn't think he was god awful either. And it's the whole thing that you just said. He's got the whole playbook in his repertoire.
That Jason Wilde on Jen, Gabe, and Chewy with Mark Chmura earlier today. And I think it's a really interesting conversation to have because, look, I like the idea of Malik Willis. I like the idea of, the mobility and some of the different skills that he brings to the table that Sean Clifford definitely doesn't bring, and Jordan Love just doesn't do as well as Malik Willis, which would mainly be the mobility thing. I trust Jordan Love to do just about everything else better. I would imagine if you asked Matt LaFleur who he would rather start, right? You're having a Door County Distillery bourbon with Matt LaFleur, off the record, just hanging out on his nice deck, I assume he probably has up in Green Bay. Say, hey, Matt, thanks for the invite. Thanks for letting me chill out on the deck with you. Appreciate you having me. And he says, yeah, of course, good to have a friend over. I said, Matt, I'm just curious, man. You trade for this kid out of Tennessee a couple of weeks ago. Is he ready? Is he ready to be your starter in a game that you really kind of need to win? Make that record look a little bit better. It's much better to be 1-1 than 0-2. I think Matt would go, yeah, he's really talented. He's got some skills. He's a hard worker. I don't know if I'm ready to toss him out there this week, though. I think I'd probably rather have Sean out there. I think that's what he'd say. Because we know LaFleur likes Sean Clifford, obviously enough to keep him around. But I think Matt LaFleur probably would prefer Sean Clifford to be the backup to Jordan Love than Malik Willis. But that's more of a Goody move. Goody makes the roster cuts. Goody made the trade for Malik Willis. You don't trade for a guy and not have him serve as your backup. And unfortunately, the reality the Green Bay Packers now live in is your quarterback is out. You lost your quarterback in week 1. You got to do something now. You don't trade for a guy not to start him, so I get that. But if it was completely up to Matt LaFleur, I think he would rather start Sean Clifford this week. And as the head coach, he has the decision and the power to make the decision of, if things go south quickly for Malik Willis, to change over to Sean Clifford. And obviously I don't hope that happens, right? I hope Malik Willis goes in there and absolutely cuts it up, man. Right? Like, I hope he walks out of there with 4 touchdown passes and the Packers are getting phone calls from Malik Willis. That's the ideal situation. That probably won't happen. But the idea that Sean Clifford knows this offense better, he was running with the ones in practices when Jordan Love was holding in, and then ultimately he played a majority of those preseason games. Like, I think that's probably the guy I would rather see out there. I don't know that I'd be any more confident than I am in Malik Willis, because I think Malik Willis' ceiling is certainly higher than Sean Clifford's. But to have a guy that knows the system the way Sean Clifford does, it's an intriguing option. So I wouldn't doubt, depending on how long Love is out, that you see Sean Clifford at some point. I definitely don't doubt that at all. Hunter, go ahead.
I feel like this is the issue with the whole siloed system that the Packers have come up with, where the head coach isn't going to make roster decisions and all of that stuff. And you're running into it where it's like Matt LaFleur knows this team. He knows that Sean Clifford, I don't have to change things for the O-line and the wide receivers and the running backs for them to be able to compete on Sunday. But my GM made this move. I've got to stick with it, and I just got to figure it out now. I'm curious for you as a fan, at what point do you really get fed up with this siloed system, especially if Malik Willis goes out there and stinks it up, and halftime it's Sean Clifford, and then the offense at least looks semi-normal, where you're like, why are we going about things this way as a team? Because you just hurt your chances to win a game because of it.
So it's an interesting point by you, and it's more so in the philosophy of the Packers organization, right? Like the general manager is going to have the final say on everything. And for a guy like Matt LaFleur, who I think has a lot of control and a lot of say of what goes into those decisions, this feels like one he didn't have a ton of say in, right? Like I imagine he was in the loop that they were inquiring about Malik Willis or a different backup quarterback. Wildy and I talked about it yesterday on Weekly Wildy. I don't get why you trade for Malik Willis when Taylor Heineke was available. Taylor Heineke was traded for a 6th-round pick, 1 round higher, to the Los Angeles Chargers this offseason. Hunter, I know you're not a Packers fan, but if I said to you, hey, you can either have Taylor Heineke, Malik Willis, or Sean Clifford start a Week 2 game, it's a no-brainer, right? You're picking Taylor Heineke.
Yeah, it's Taylor Heineke every single time, and the value that they must have placed on that 6th-round pick to not do that, or they missed the call that was made to them, and that's why they didn't make the move.
I think it's I don't think they I don't think they realized he was available.
No, and that stinks then, because it's like it is leaps and bounds. Taylor Heineke is a much better quarterback than either of those two.
He was a starting quarterback in the league.
Yeah,
for multiple seasons, and that's where I get tied up is. I know you can't plan for injuries, especially the timing of injuries. The timing on this stinks for the Packers, whether you're Goody, whether you're LaFleur, or anybody else. The good part of the timing is this is the weakest part of your schedule the next couple of weeks. But for a team that really didn't like either of the quarterbacks, aside from Jordan Love, they had in camp, to go out and trade for a guy right at the deadline, the cut-down deadline, right before the regular season, and then to have to play him in Week 2, that timing sucks. There's no way of splitting hairs on that.
I feel like the timing, even if this injury happens 3 weeks later, the timing is way better. Even if the schedule is more difficult at that point, just because Malik Willis really doesn't have a genuine chance. And I'm not even saying that because I'm rooting against the Packers actively. It's just Baker Mayfield had to do it in a 2-day stretch, and that just wasn't fair to him when he went to LA.
Yeah, but it worked. You got to win.
Thing. Yeah, but it was really, really difficult, and that was a disgusting win. That's the thing. It's for him to get a win, this is going to have to look like Iowa football the last couple of years, where they're winning a 10-7 type of game, unless Josh Jacobs just blows up and has an incredible game and scores 3 touchdowns. That's what's going to have to happen here. And that's just not fair to Malik Willis, because then he's going to get held accountable for the result of this game, and he shouldn't.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, I bring up the idea of, could this go so poorly to the point where we see Sean Clifford on Sunday? I don't know what would have to happen if it's first quarter, it's back-to-back-to-back 3-and-outs where he's just not moving the ball. You just hope it's not a situation where you're down by 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and they say, all right, Sean, let's see what you got. Because I really do think this is a winnable game for the Packers. And in fact, spoiler alert, when it comes to Green Bay game day on Sunday, I will pick the Packers to win. I think they win this game. I don't know how, and I don't think it's going to be pretty, but it reminds me of the home opener a year ago. When I think it was week 3. The Packers played the Saints. And it was ultimately, 18 points all in the fourth quarter by the Packers, and the Saints missed the field goal at the end of regulation to lose by a point. Packers win 18-17. Like, it could be an ugly game like that, and I still think the Packers will find a way to win. That's where my head's at now. See if I change my thought in the next 48 hours. But I really do view this as a winnable game for Green Bay. And whether it's Malik Willis, whether it's Sean Clifford, whether it's Jaden Reed playing quarterback, I think the Packers have enough firepower offensively to win the game. It's ultimately going to come down to what the dynamic duo in the backfield for Indianapolis does, with Anthony Richardson, who's got an arm as strong as anybody in the league and the ability to rush the football. And then, by the way, you have a guy who's known pretty well in the state of Wisconsin by the name of Jonathan Taylor, who might have a pretty big game on Sunday. So if you can alleviate your rush defense from what it was a week ago a little bit, I hold them to 17 points, you're going to win this game. And I think it's doable, frankly, for Green Bay. But maybe I'll be totally wrong and it'll be a complete disaster. And when we talk on Monday, we're looking at 0-2.